I've been debating whether or not to talk about this, and it's sort of like the low-hanging fruit for podcasts right now to talk about politics and what's going on in the world. I don't really feel like I have anything to offer this conversation specifically, but I also feel like I do have some opinions that aren't being shared, or at least I'm not seeing them in the news media or the podcasts that I listen to. So I did want to share some thoughts on what's been going on in Minneapolis. We've had two police shooting deaths where police, we'll say ICE, federal agents, whatever, have, for all intents and purposes, they've taken the lives of American citizens, and there's all kinds of debate right now as to who's at fault and the background of it. And, oh, well, these are people who are trying to stop them. Was it legitimate for these shootings to happen? All those debates are already being had. I'm not going to offer anything additional to that. What I do want to share are some of my thoughts in general that I don't think are being represented, or I don't think that when you have two sides talking about this thing, there's something that, listen, I'm 42. I've lived through a lot of ups and downs in politics. I've lived through Democrats in charge, Republicans in charge, back and forth and back and forth. And there's a lot of repetition, a lot of things that I see over and over. And I wanted to highlight some of the things that I think average Americans should really think about before they engage themselves intellectually or emotionally in this conversation. And the first one is, it seems like when the people who are talking about this are discussing these whether you're on the side of the person who got shot, or you're on the side of the federal government who was doing the shooting, and you'll notice here in a minute that I'm being very specific in how I phrase this, there's a striking inability for people to separate methods from madness. And I'm reading these right from my notes because it's the idea of the federal government using force the way that it's using it is uncomfortable to me. I find it repulsive, but not because they are deporting people, right? And so this aggression that I'm seeing from these police officers, I've seen it for a long time, and I don't think it's unique to the agency. What I find is that it seems like it is unique to certain individuals, or maybe a handful of individuals that happen to be grouped together, and the environment is creating the excuse, maybe, or the reason to justify that individual or those individuals' desire to explode the way that they are. And listen, this idea that someone fears for their life and they can then discharge a weapon on another person, I get it. It's a valid reason. It's justifiable, right? It's legal, right? Is it right? That's for whoever to decide. We don't know how afraid a person is. We don't know how justified a person feels. But what I do know is I would prefer people who are in police, federal government forces, who are carrying weapons to protect the peace officers, as they're often called, by the people who are on their side even, which is interesting. I would prefer them to have the longer patience level and not be the ones who are doing what they're doing in this case. And I've seen way too many examples, and I'm not even talking about these last two incidences that we've seen in Minneapolis. I'm talking about for decades now of federal or police force. I won't even say federal because I've seen it at the state level, I've seen it at the local level, of people who are in law enforcement in general. There are just too many examples of those individuals using their power to bully other people. justified or not, that's what they're doing. And when I say justified or not, you might say, oh, well, sometimes there's a need to use force. I'm talking about these instances where the amount of force that was used appears to be unnecessary. Now, what I think I want to do as I talk about this is I actually want to remove the shootings from the conversation because everyone has an opinion on the shootings, right? I want to hone in on something I see all the time. And I'm even going to use an example from the past, but something I see all the time that police do, and maybe it's a tactic they shouldn't use. Like maybe it's not a good idea, right? So first of all, when you watch the most recent shooting, I don't know the names of the people. I'm not that invested in these news stories. But the most recent one, where the gentleman had the firearm in his back, in his belt, on his back, and they took it and they shot him. He had a gun. Were they justified? I don't know. But what wasn't justified? Moments before he gets shot was this push on this woman. Now, I'm not leveraging the fact that she's a woman. The amount of force that the officer used to shove that woman that he ultimately was trying to help, and then he got in the middle of it. Should he have? I don't know. Whatever. It is what it is. It's arguing back and forth. There's going to be 1,000 podcasts on that. I don't see a justification for the use of force just with the hands shoving that woman to the ground. It just made no sense to me. And I hone in on that because that is an act of aggression that you might say, oh, wind back the tape a little bit and you'll see what happened. Listen, the gentleman that ended up getting, unfortunately, shot and killed had a weapon. You can come up with an argument to justify his shooting and say, oh, it's unfortunate, but this, that, and the other thing, and here's the reason why, and you can pick a side. Fine, whatever. I would love to hear the justification of what happened right before that, where you full force, double arm, lean into shove a person. Now, going to back a couple of weeks to the prior shooting where the woman was in her car. The thing that stands out to me is not that she tries to pull away, but what happens moments before that when the police officer who was by her door aggressively yanks on her door handle. And it's an interesting image because it's like, what are you doing? Now you say, oh, it was justified. She was blocking them. She was belligerent. They needed to arrest her. She wasn't obeying orders. Like, bro, like, what are we doing? Like, chill out. What are we doing? And what I see in both of those instances is the escalating act from the people who are supposed to be the ones de-escalating. And you're going to hear that a lot. Some people don't like that. But I look at it and I go, if the roles were reversed, then escalation would be justified. And listen, if you come up to my door and you yank on it the way that police officer did, or if you go up to somebody in front of me and full two-arm push somebody the way that police officer did, I can't, in my mind, go, yeah, I can see that. Now, I have seen videos, clips. A lot of these clips, you don't know when they're from, but they resurface whenever one of these situations happen. I saw one of these clips where a person was standing in front of the vehicle and the officer gets out and shoves her out of the way. That one, I kind of was like, okay, she's impeding the traffic. And so I can kind of understand why he wanted her out of the way. He was frustrated. Kind of understand the logic there. But in this case, it was totally unnecessary. And it made me hearken back to back when, during COVID, when there were, I don't know if they were George Floyd riots or what the riots were for that, at that point in time for that administration, what political thing was going on at the time. But I'm from Western New York, and there was an incident in Buffalo. I looked it up last night where I think the guy was 75 years old. And they were full body, full face mask, not covered faces. I'll get to that in a minute. But they just push this 75-year-old guy over, and he kind of stumbles over himself, but he was kind of standing his own ground, and he gets shoved over, and he falls completely, his head hits the ground, and he falls completely unconscious. And one of the people, I don't remember where this was. I don't know if they were federal agents. I don't remember who the police force was in this situation. But one of the gentlemen bent down to help him, and another one grabbed him and was like, "Don't help him. Like, we got to keep doing this." And I'm like, why? Like, he didn't do anything, right? There was no threat involved in any of these three scenarios that I just explained. There was no threat. Now, you can argue that when the woman in the car mashed the gas, the officer who was standing in front of the vehicle, yeah, he might have feared for his life. Okay, maybe don't stand in front of a vehicle. I'm just saying. I think somebody said that he was not too long earlier almost hit by a vehicle. Well, maybe not stand in front of vehicles. I don't know. My thought. And then you might say, well, how are they supposed to arrest her if they don't stop the vehicle? Well, I don't know. I don't think they're there to arrest citizens. Maybe take down her license plate and give that to local PD and have them handle it. You know, maybe that would have been a better process. And you might say, oh, well, local PD won't handle it. That's not my understanding of what ICE is there to do. Focus on your task at hand. And it just seems like it's getting escalated to a point where these people are using an amount of force that is unnecessary. And then as that force is used, right, the situation escalates to a point where they then get the justification to do the things that they're doing. And those people who support them come alongside and go, yep, see, oh, these people are out of control, and, you know, you shouldn't be there. You should be in your house. You shouldn't be carrying a weapon, like at a protest. Well, okay, that's not how the Second Amendment works, but okay, sure. But yeah, there's like a striking inability, I want to get back to my point, of people to separate method from madness. And so what I'm saying here is that what I've seen over the last 20 years is I've seen that both sides, Democrats, Republicans, left, right, conservative, what liberal, whatever you want, what terms you want to use for the sides, right, for the extreme sides, they will justify their actions for their purpose no matter what. And so rather than being against this use of force, they are only against this method when it doesn't suit their madness. Okay? So if taking away your Second Amendment rights is something that the right is firmly against, somehow, magically, all of a sudden, if given the right circumstances that match their madness, they'll justify it. They'll stand right up in front of you and read from the prompter, verbatim, word for word, like, oh, well, this is one of those extreme situations. Okay. And so where I find myself politically is not left or right, but opposed to the use of this force, right? I'm opposed to these officers shoving people with all their might. That doesn't seem like a de-escalation tactic. It doesn't seem like something that's used to control the situation. In any case, in any reason, right? Whether we're talking about COVID riots or George Floyd riots or ICE riots, that's not an appropriate use of force, in my opinion. And so I don't care what the reason is, you shouldn't be doing that. That's just my logical conclusion. And that ends up putting me in a weird spot, because when this method is being used by the left thinks I'm on the right because I'm opposed to it. And then when the right is doing this, the right thinks I'm on the left because I'm opposed to this method, this use of force. And that's why I end up falling independent or libertarian, because I do not like the government doing these types of things, using this level of force. And one thing that does scare me quite a bit is I've seen over the last 20 years where one side will use a method of force, an amount of force, and justify it. And meanwhile, this side who's not in power will say, well, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. And then the power structure will flip and they will say, well, you did that, when you were fighting your cause. So now I'm going to take it one step higher. I'm going to increase the amount of violence. I'm going to increase the amount of force. I'm going to step on your rights. And then this side goes, well, I thought you said we couldn't do that, right? Because they're not in power. And then they get back in power. And they go, well, because you did that, now we're going to do this. And they say, you can't do that. You can't do that. That's a violation of my rights. And it just keeps going. And the whole time it's escalating and escalating and escalating. And it's like, if we could just get people to agree on separating the method from the madness, right? Like, regardless of your position, we don't do this thing, right? Regardless of whether it's for the right reasons, this is not appropriate behavior from our law enforcement officials. Like, can we get there? I mean, when I look at that most recent shooting, I watched in probably the span of 3 minutes. I don't know. I should go back and time it and figure it out. But a federal agent who's completely lost control. He's not doing anything with any sort of control. Full force shove a woman to the ground. Immediately pull out his pepper spray and spray multiple people without discretion. He's not like, as far as I could tell, the guy who ended up getting shot was just trying to block his own eyes and he was reacting to the pepper spray. That's my read on the situation. Maybe he was trying to attack the agent. I didn't see it that way, but that's apparently a way people can perceive it. And then I saw six men wrestle this guy to the ground. And one thing that I've only seen referenced in a couple of videos is one of the agents just gives up on the pepper spray and just starts bludgeoning him repeatedly over the head with the pepper spray gun. And I'm like, none of that, right? None of that is appropriate behavior. It's not necessary. You have 6 people involved. When it's 6-on-1, you don't really need a weapon. Now, if he had pulled his gun out and was threatening them in that way, they didn't even realize all these things happened prior to them even realizing he was carrying a gun. So all of those uses of force escalated the situation, in my opinion. And the people who are doing that were agents of law, peace officers. I don't think that's appropriate. I don't care if the issue's COVID. I don't care if the issue's race. I don't care if the issue's, in this case, deportation. I don't care. That just doesn't seem appropriate for officials who are supposed to be enforcing law. It just doesn't seem right to me. The second thing, I got to get quicker on this because we're going to waste a lot of time and we won't have much time for our main topic. So the first thing is a striking inability to separate method from madness, to say, no matter what, this is not appropriate. This action is not appropriate. We seem to have lost that. The second thing is an inability to empathize with our opposition. People just don't seem to be able to step outside of themselves and take the position of their opposition. And it's funny because, I shouldn't say funny, but it's interesting because I've been watching now, like I said, for 20 years. I'm 42, 22 years, whatever, however long I've been watching both sides do the exact same things for different reasons. And listen, if you believed what your fellow American who you disagree with believed as passionate as they believed it, you would understand what they're doing. You would, like, oh, well, like this is my favorite one. You wouldn't be bringing a gun to a protest that's just not appropriate. And yet, during COVID, you had people on the right who were Trump supporters, I think Trump even supported, who stormed the Michigan Capitol, and they were full-on brandishing, I don't know what they were, probably the news called it AR-15s or whatever, but they had, there was a group that literally stormed the Capitol, and none of them got shot. And I'm not saying they should get shot because, again, that's a method that should be separated from the madness. But the right was supporting it because they felt that the reason, right, justified their use of force in that case for people to carry their weapons in that protest. And it's like, if you could just for a moment put yourself in their shoes, you might understand why they're doing what they're doing, blowing whistles and trying to go, the inability to at least understand their concern You don't have to agree with them, but you could at least put yourself in their shoes. And it just seems like we're unable to empathize with their position. And all you would really have to do is, in this particular case, is put an ICE vest or an ICE uniform on the people who are being shot in your mind, mentally. So what's interesting is I don't know if this is AI or not. I see people saying it's AI, but there was a video that came out that supposedly was like 10 days earlier of the individual who was shot kicking a Ford Expedition, knocking the taillight off, just being completely insane, right? Just yelling, spitting, kicking, whatever. And I guess the theory is that because this happened, then this justified what happened later. Total misnomer. I don't think that's true. Again, I don't think even then he did anything that would have justified the use of force. I still think that if he did something illegal, they should have arrested him. Like, he broke that vehicle if that was a real video, okay? But what I thought was interesting was in that video, everybody's saying, see, this is not a peaceful man. Interesting. So you're telling me that charging someone's vehicle, kicking it, and doing that is showing that you're not peaceful. Well, what are the ICE agents doing when they are grabbing this woman's car and standing in front of it? Like, how do we not understand this dynamic, and how do we come to the defense of one or the other? Like, I sit there and look outside of it and go, roles reversed. Like, I'm surprised the left hasn't done this, but said, oh, didn't you see that ICE agent almost run him over with his car? Right? Like, that's how ridiculous this is. It's like, or another thing you don't see is like, so they show that video clip, right? It's kind of like proof that he was, I guess it was okay to shoot him. I don't know. It's absurd. But it's like, oh, well, we don't know. This is how the right would act if he was wearing an ICE vest. Well, we don't know what happened leading up to that. We need to see what happened before that. He could have been, they could have been yelling at him, or maybe they were violent towards him before that. So let's back the tape up. Well, then the next thing is, well, let's back the tape up a little further and back the tape up a little further. It's like, yeah, how about let's not do those things, okay? He should not be kicking their Ford Expedition. They should not be yanking on her door, and they should not be full force pushing. Like, if we get to this place where we can understand that we separate the method from the madness and we empathize with our opposition and say, hey, I understand why you're upset, but this behavior does not correlate. It seems like things calm down. That's my thought on it. So a striking inability to separate method from madness, inability to empathize with opposition. And the last thing I wanted to point out was I've noticed an inability to identify propaganda talking points. This is probably the worst to me. Now, I know I shouldn't say it's the worst. People losing their life is the worst, obviously. But watching Kristi Noem and I think the guy who was the head, I think he got demoted, the head of ICE or whatever, standing up there and telling the story of what happened in this most recent shooting. And it's literally word for word the same. Like, he was there to do the most amount of damage. It was a weird thing, but it was word for word the same. And it was no different. This is probably going to offend some people. I don't care. It was no different than watching Dr. Fauci lie to the American people on CNN or Fox News. Listen, I don't care what political party you're affiliated with. That should annoy you. That should annoy you that they think you're that stupid. That they can sit there and read a prompter that they've both clearly written and said, okay, this is what we're going to give to them. And then they defend it, and they have all these like dodgy ways of answering questions rather than just saying, hey, we think a couple of these agents screwed up and we're going to deal with them. Why is that not an option? Why does that not even appear as an option? Is it like, oh, if we admit one agent got a little rogue, then the whole administration failed? Like, I don't get it. It's like an all or nothing mentality, and it doesn't need to be, right? So this inability of people to identify propaganda, particularly when you agree with the propaganda, and that's really disturbing to me, because people who were supportive of the COVID protocols and were concerned with what was going on with COVID, they would eat that stuff up. Fauci would get up there and say, 6 feet, masks, the shot works, all these things, right? Maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist. I don't know. What I do know is I know what propaganda looks like. And Fauci and Noam and Bovee, it's all the same. They're just reading talking points. And whenever they've constructed those talking points, it's propaganda. They're trying to hide something. They're trying to quell something. They're trying to win maybe some political points somewhere. It's listening to that from both of those two individuals was just, it's one of the things that's most refreshing about Trump. Now, I'm not a big Trump supporter. I'm not a Trump supporter at all. But he doesn't do that. You don't write him a script and he reads it. He can't help himself. And that's somewhat refreshing. It's also something I like about Robert Kennedy, is he's not tied to a script. Like he can freewheel and say what's on his mind and reason actively as a situation is evolving. He can be right in that moment. That whole them reading that, staring at the camera, face on, staring at it and going blah 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 blah. It was like, that's propaganda. And to not be aware of that and go and have your radar perk up and go, this is something, whether you're on the right or the left, you should be able to look at that and go, I don't know about that. Like I don't know about that. Like when Fauci did it, when Noam did it, when this Bovine guy or Bovine, I don't know how you say his name. All of those situations, when they start regurgitating that stuff word for word, identical, you should be going, I don't know about this situation. It should make you very uncomfortable.
No quit, no quit. Building their wall. While they talk about us, all they talk about us. Educated, experienced, still not credible. So we embraced it. Now we're uncredible.